Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling, well, frankly, one of the most complex missions we've faced. We've got this really dense stack of sources, prophetic transcripts, detailed dream accounts, theological deep dives, all laser-focused on one event, the Exodus, or the Rapture, with a timeline pointing squarely at 2025.
It's quite a convergence, isn't it? You've got ancient prophecy mixed with modern interpretations involving celestial signs, numerology, and these different, sometimes conflicting calendar systems. Our job today isn't to say this date is right, but really to guide you, the listener, through the internal logic.
Yeah, how do these sources, these witnesses, as they call them, arrive at their conclusions? It's a winding path.
It really is. We need to synthesize how they connect the dots, navigating everything from, visions and dreams to some pretty intricate calendar math.
Exactly. And we're looking at actual transcripts, sources like the 6 dreams given to someone called Joshua, complex calendar work by George, plus theological arguments. They're all searching for this appointed time. And just to be clear, when we say Rapture or Exodus here, we mean that moment believers are supposedly caught up, kicking off, well, the final 7 years.
And the sources are pretty adamant that this Exodus, this event, it has to land in the Jubilee year. The dates they zero in on, initially at least, are very specific. September 23rd and 24th, 2025.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we even touch the dates and the math, we need to grasp the core ideas these sources build on. There seem to be 3 big ones. The Jewish wedding pattern, this idea of a 21-day delay, and then the massive headache of which calendar actually counts. Let's start with that first one, the Jewish wedding. I found this fascinating. How exactly do the sources draw that parallel between a wedding and the rapture?
It's really the central framework, the architecture for their whole timeline. They explain that the rapture and the 7 years that follow, what's often called the tribulation, they mirror a traditional Jewish wedding.
How so?
Well, the earthly wedding feast, where the bride and groom were sort of secluded, lasted 7 days. The sources see that 7-day period as a direct parallel to the 7 years of tribulation on earth, while believers are, theoretically, away with Christ.
Right, the wedding feast in heaven, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the groom's role.
Exactly. So the groom, who represents Christ, he goes to the Father's house first. The tradition was he'd build an addition, prepare a place for his bride. The sources connect this to the roughly 2,000 years since Christ's resurrection, this period of preparation.
Okay, hold on. This is a key point. If they're landing on specific dates in 2025, how do they deal with that major verse, Matthew 24.36? But concerning that day and hour, no one knows. That feels like a direct contradiction.
Ah, yes. That's where the wedding pattern provides their explanation, their clarification, you might say. They argue Matthew 24.36 means only the Father decides when the addition is ready, when it's time. Setting the day belongs exclusively to him.
Ah, I see.
But crucially, once the Father gives the groom the go-ahead, the timing isn't total secret anymore. It sort of becomes known, at least the general time frame.
So it moves from absolutely no one knows to, okay, the season is known, but the exact moment depends on the Father's signal.
Precisely. And they really emphasize this using the parable of the 10 virgins. Think about it. The bride, the bridesmaids, everyone in town basically knew the wedding day was upon them. The problem wasn't the day itself. It was the delay.
Right. He was late.
Expected around sunset, but doesn't show up until midnight in the parable. The absolute last possible moment. It underscores the need for vigilance, for being ready even when there's a delay.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Now, about the timing, 2025 being the Jubilee year, what's the significance of that? Why a Jubilee?
Well, traditionally, a Jubilee year comes after 7 cycles of 7 years, so it's the 50th year. It's biblically a time of profound release. Debts canceled, slaves freed, land returned. It symbolizes liberty. So the sources see it as the absolutely perfect, most fitting time for the ultimate release and homecoming for believers.
And the initial date pinpointed within that Jubilee year.
Came to this witness named Joshua. He was apparently told the target was September 23rd and 24th, 2025.
Which lines up perfectly with the Feast of Trumpets, Tishri 1, the Jewish New Year, announced by the shofar.
Exactly. A day of awakening, of sounding the alarm. And that initial date, Tishri 1, 2025, received strong confirmation, according to the sources, from what they call the V-shaped dream. This was given to the other main witness, George, on September 22nd, 2020.
Okay, wait, September 22nd, 2020.
Exactly 5 years to the day before the Feast of Trumpets in 2025. The timing itself is seen as significant.
Let's dig into this dream because the symbolism is really layered. George is running a marathon, 26.2 miles. Why is 26 important?
Numerology is huge in these sources. 26 is the numerical value assigned to YHWH, God's sacred Hebrew name. So he's running a divine race, you see.
Yeah.
And he wasn't alone. He was running with a coworker named Steve.
Steve.
Yes, and the analysis connects Steve to the Greek name Stephanos, which means crown. The idea is it points to believers casting their crowns before God, like in Revelation 4.0. It's all deeply symbolic communication, according to George.
Wow. Okay. And the finish line map. That seems key.
Absolutely the key. The map showed a sharp V shape at the finish. Now, V in Roman numerals is 5. So the dream is seen as pointing directly to 5 years remaining until this prophetic finish line, the end of what they call the Age of Grace.
And then they overlay this V onto a star map.
Yes, this is where it gets really intricate. They claim the V perfectly connects the heads of the 2 fish in the constellation Pisces.
Pisces, the fish, symbolizing Christians.
Right. And this celestial connection is central to George's interpretation. He tracks the planets Mars, which they interpret as the red dragon or Satan, and Venus, the bright morning star representing Christ. Their positions relative to this V shape in the sky, just before the Jubilee year begins, are seen as absolute confirmation of 2025.
So we've got this initial date, September 23rd, 24th, backed by the Jubilee, the Feast of Trumpets, dreams, numerology, and celestial alignments. It seems pretty locked in. But what happens if those dates pass with no event? Does the whole thing fall apart?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, according to the sources, is no. This is where the concept of the 21-day delay comes in. Suddenly, the Feast of Trumpets isn't the arrival day anymore.
Ah, okay.
It's reframed. It becomes the cry, the departure day, the moment Christ leaves the Father's house to get the bride, but not the day he actually brings her home.
And the reason for this delay?
It's explicitly linked to war in the heavens. They cite Revelation 12, verses 7 and 8, describing the battle between Michael and the dragon. This spiritual warfare, they claim, is what delays Christ's return with his bride.
Okay, a cosmic battle delaying the arrival. And the specific length, 21 days, they find support for that.
They do, in 2 main ways. First, they point straight to the book of Daniel. Remember when Daniel prayed and the angel bringing the answer was delayed for 21 days?
Because of resistance from the Prince of Persia, right?
Yeah.
Another heavenly battle.
Exactly. So they see a direct parallel, a repeating pattern. And second, another prophetic witness apparently received visions involving eggs hatching. A chick takes 21 days to emerge from its shell. It's seen as another sign confirming this 21-day waiting period.
So, if we follow this logic, the original Feast of Trumpets date is still significant, but as a starting point for the journey. The actual arrival, the rapture itself, gets shifted 21 days later.
Correct. And that lands it squarely on another significant feast day, Shemini Atzeret.
Shemini Atzeret, the assembly of the 8th day.
Yes. It falls 7 days after the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. And the timing is seen as perfect. It means the Feast of Trumpets is fulfilled, but by Christ's departure and the start of the heavenly battle, not his immediate arrival. It validates the original prophecy while explaining why the event didn't happen on that exact day.
And the meaning of the name Shemini Atzeret itself, assembly of the 8th day. What does Atzeret mean?
It carries the sense of lingering or holding back or tarrying. It fits the wedding analogy beautifully, doesn't it? There's a rabbinic tradition that sees this day as God asking his people to just linger one more day with him after the big festival week.
Like a special intimate day after the main celebration.
Exactly, like the father asking the newlywed couple to stay for one more private day after the 7-day feast, a day of consummation, perhaps. And calculated using the Jewish calendar they believe was in use at the time of Christ. This date in 2025 falls from sunset October 14th to sunset October 15th.
Okay, so now we've shifted from late September to mid-October. Seems settled, right? Shemini Atzeret. But then we hit the calendar wall. This is where things get really contentious, debating which calendar God actually uses, Gregorian, Julian, or something else entirely.
This is where it gets very complex, but the core motivation is clear. The sources fundamentally distrust the standard calendars we all use. They argue the Julian calendar, set up by Julius Caesar, a Roman emperor, and the Gregorian calendar, adjusted by a pope.
Both seen as man-made manipulations.
Right. Manipulated by sinful, fallible men is a phrase used. The argument is theological. Why would God honor a timekeeping system established by pagan Rome or the papacy? Systems they view as historically hostile to true faith.
It's a rejection of that historical authority over divine timing. So what's the alternative they propose? Which calendar does God honor, according to them?
They point to the Enoch Calendar, sometimes called the Enoch Calendar. This, they claim, is the original God-ordained calendar. It's quite different. It's a solar calendar, apparently perfectly balanced at 364 days every year. No leap years needed. A week is always 7 days, a month 30 or 31, a year exactly 52 weeks. Critically, the day runs sunset to sunset based on Genesis 1, evening and morning were the first day. And the year starts around the spring equinox, not January 1st.
Okay, a 364-day year, starting in spring, sunset to sunset days. That must throw off the dates significantly compared to our Gregorian calendar.
It absolutely does. If you calculate the feasts based on the Enoch Calendar principles for 2025, those original target dates, September 23rd and 24th, representing Tishri 1 or the Feast of Trumpets, they actually haven't arrived yet on God's supposed true calendar by that point in our Gregorian year.
So where do they land?
They translate to October 16th and 17th on our standard Gregorian calendar in 2025.
Wow. Okay, so we go from September 2324, add the 21-day delay to get Octo 1415, Shemini answer it, but then adjust for the Enoch calendar, and the actual watch date, the Feast of Trumpets on God's calendar, becomes October 16th, 17th.
Precisely. It brings a kind of synchronicity for those following this line of reasoning. It keeps the Jubilee year, it keeps the feast patterns, but corrects for the calendar they believe God originally intended. It lands just after the Gregorian Shemini Atzeret, fitting that late October timeframe.
And weaving through all these date shifts and calendar debates is this constant theme of an Exodus pattern. Can you expand on that? How does the Exodus story fit in?
Well, the sources see this whole period, the initial dates, the delays, the calendar confusion, the new clues emerging as a kind of modern-day Exodus journey. God is sustaining the faithful watchers with heavenly manna, which they interpret as these ongoing prophetic updates and confirmations.
Like spiritual food for the journey through the wilderness of waiting?
Exactly. And they see echoes of Exodus language and events in the news. They point to things like a speech by Netanyahu where he actually used the phrase, "let my people go." And apparently during that very speech, there were reports of a large number of people walking out of the UN building a symbolic exodus.
And didn't you mention something about Sharm el-Sheikh?
Yes. They note the location of hostage release negotiations, Sharm el-Sheikh, a resort city on the Red Sea. The timing of certain agreements there, around October 9th in one instance, is connected back to the 16th day of the first month in the original Exodus narrative, trying to link current events to that ancient template.
It's all about finding patterns, shadows of the past playing out now. And speaking of shadows, we can't ignore the darker side mentioned, the dragon and occult connections.
Right, particularly focused on the U.S. One dream interpretation involves retrieving enemy arrows, which is linked to occult practices. There's a specific claim that Washington, D.C.'s layout mirrors ancient Luxor in Egypt.
Luxor, associated with the deification of pharaohs.
Correct. And the Washington Monument, the obelisk, gets specific attention. They claim it's the world's tallest, and that its intended height was 6,666 inches, a clear symbol, in their view, of the dragon or the coming Antichrist. The idea is that the war in the heavens results in Satan being cast down to earth, initiating the tribulation right as believers are supposedly caught up.
Which brings us back to the purpose behind all this complexity, this date shifting, this calendar confusion. It sounds incredibly stressful for those trying to follow along. If the goal is holiness, how does this constant uncertainty help?
That's a central theme in the source material. They state repeatedly that God is deliberately using this confusion to test hearts. The big question, they say, echoing Scripture, is when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? God isn't looking for perfect calendar calculations, apparently, but for persistent faith, holiness, spiritual readiness.
Preparation of the heart, not just the mind. And this links to a required waiting period.
Yes, very much so. The pattern of 7 days keeps reappearing as essential for consecration, for purification. They point to Noah waiting 7 days in the ark before the floodgates opened. And Aaron and his sons had to wait 7 days outside the tabernacle for their atonement and consecration, as Leviticus 8 lays out.
So this current period of watching and waiting with all its adjustments is seen as that necessary time for believers to purify themselves, to repent.
Exactly. And complaining about the delays or getting frustrated with the shifting dates is actually viewed as evidence that more purification is needed. It's a test of patience and trust.
But underlying all the testing and waiting, the message seems to be about God's mercy.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize that God always warns before major judgment. Noah, Amos 3.7. Surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. These warnings, these complex clues, they're framed as expressions of God's desire for people to turn to him, referencing verses like 1 Timothy 2, that God desires all to be saved, and 2 Peter 3, that he is patient, not wanting any to perish. Judgment, they stress, really comes through rejection of the warning.
And this relates to prophetic accuracy too, doesn't it, if a predicted date passes?
Right. They argue God doesn't lie, but his ways are higher than ours, citing Isaiah 55. Think of Jonah. He declared Nineveh would be overthrown in 40 days. It wasn't, because they repented. Did that make Jonah a false prophet? No. It showed God's mercy responding to human action. So if the timing isn't exactly as humans calculate or expect, it doesn't necessarily invalidate the core message. It might be another layer of the test demanding Abraham-like faith that believes God even when circumstances seem contradictory.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize. We see a clear prophetic narrative unfolding in these sources. It starts with an initial date, Feast of Trumpets, Sep 23-24, 2025. Then comes the 21-day delay due to heavenly warfare, shifting the focus to Shemini Atzeret, October 14-15. But then the calendar debate kicks in, suggesting God's true calendar, Enoch's, places the real Feast of Trumpets alignment on October 16th or 17th, 2025. And all through this, the Jewish wedding and Exodus patterns are the constant threads.
That's a good summary. And it raises a crucial point for anyone tracking this. What if all these 2025 dates, Sep 23-24, October 14-15, October 16-17, turn out to be incorrect for the Rapture Exodus event? Well, the sources actually provide a kind of backstop, a safety valve.
Which is?
A supposedly definitive date for Christ's physical return to earth as king. They anchor this event to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, on September 15th, 2032.
2032, okay. And how is that date anchored?
By two things. A future blood moon tetrad, aligning with Jewish feasts in 2032-2033, and what they identify as the definitive start date of the final 7-year Jubilee cycle, which they place on October 23rd, 2025. That date, October 23, 2025, marks exactly 7 prophetic years of 360 days each prior to the Yom Kippur 2032 return. So that 7-year window starting in late October 2025 becomes the absolute time frame, even if the exact start date of the rapture within that window remains, well, debated.
Interesting. So the 7-year countdown beginning in late 2025 is firm, even if the precise day of the Exodus event initiating it is still being refined through these interpretations. Okay, that leads us to our final thought for you, the listener. Here's something provocative emerging from these sources. A reimagining of the timeline itself. Traditionally, the tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble, is seen as preceding the 1,000-year millennium.
Right. But some analyses within this material theorize something different. They suggest the tribulation isn't before the millennium, but confined to the first 7 years of the millennial reign itself, specifically for those remaining on Earth.
Meaning the glorious reign of Christ begins concurrently with the period of intense judgment on Earth. The day of the Lord having both its positive and negative aspects happening simultaneously.
Exactly. A dramatic reversal of the common understanding. So the question for you to ponder is this. If these intricate prophetic timelines, with all their delays and complexities, are ultimately designed by God, as the sources claim, to test patience, refine faith, and filter hearts, how does that potential purpose change the way you, personally, approach uncertain knowledge, especially knowledge about the future?